few subtle aspects to look at the last interesting speech of Elon Musk, where he was warning people not to use the smartphones too much, that they are spying on them. Not only that, but they are reprogramming their brains. Okay, so basically the criticism of succumbing to the offer of modern technology. Okay, how to evade this, how to become human again, in the sense that we spend more time with the children and with one another and with nature nearby than looking into the smartphone and doing all kinds of stuff. Okay, so these aspects are the question of Nietzsche. Is it expression of decadence, that by using this technology we become more and more dissociated with life and become decadent? Or is the cause and effect the other way around, that because we are decadent we are forced to use this machinery all the time, first the physical machinery, then the informational machinery? And this also connected to the concept of the Heracleitean man and the Promethean man by Ludwig Klages, when he says the progressive loss of creative ability expresses in the development of mankind, expresses itself first in the so-called Promethean man, when the cognitive functions, let us say which he calls the spirit, the ego, basically, the analytical reason, overpowers the soul, and so that we in our inner experiences are more cognitive than emotional, pictorial, ecstatic, closely related to nature. And the second phase is the Heracleitean man, when this ego or cognitive functions or analytical reason overpowers the body, so that there what happens is that you are simply reacting by motions to certain impulses of this entity X, as we call it, as we describe it as an analytical reason, the ego, cognitive functions. You simply are forced to grab, immediately make the motion of your arm, or to pull this smartphone on, or to sit into the car and drive around, or turn on some machinery, when this feeling of emptiness arises, that you are dissociated from life. And the fact that you are dissociated from life is the cause of the overpowering of first the soul and the body by the life inimical force, which Ludwig Klages calls the entity X, or the spirit, the Geist. I call it the cognitive functions of the ego. So this we shall look into in a more poetic way now. Okay. Okay, so here we go. Smartphone is turned off. Smartphone is turned off. Not only in airplane mode, but also totally turned off. Android-powered smartphone. And I love the idea of Elon Musk, who has spoken recently in a kind of prophetic, wise way, advising the listeners on YouTube to turn off their smartphones and all the screens, small and large, regularly, so that they exert human wisdom, and that which Heidegger, a German philosopher, 20th century, which he called Gelassenheit, a kind of distance, acceptance towards technology. So that we use technology only when it helps us to live more fully and deeply and creatively as human beings. So this was a nice speech, and it made me thinking. And he also asked all the listeners who feel it is important to send it on. So I send it on to my friends, because I see them like addicts hanging, around, always with the smartphone. Any free moment of time seems to be, lost for them, not economically used if they don't inform themselves or organize their life through the smartphones. And Elon Musk rightly pointed out that even he was shocked when his son told him that he loves his smartphone more than his own child, because he spends more time with it. So he immediately decided to exclude the presence of the smartphone from any face-to-face contact with his family members, which is wise. Sometimes you see even lovers, so-called lovers, let's say, close friends sitting on a park bench or on the promenade here at the lake, and they sit close to, and everybody is looking into his smartphone. Terrible. I once saw a kind of symbol of the decay of man when I was sleeping outside in a park on, I think it was in Rethymnon, on the coast of Crete, where I always run away in winter to live in complete seclusion on the south coast. But I was at that day was in Rethymnon, and I slept outside in a park, and I wake up in the morning and there's a beautiful smell in the air, and the birds are singing, and the fresh winter spring morning on Crete is opening, and close to me, without seeing me, there was a couple of young boy and girl, and they were, I cannot pronounce what they were doing. They were involved in a kind of sexual sport, we have to call it like that, while the boy was chatting in the smartphone. Fuck you, terrible decay, decadence, which destroy also all the empires at the end through, decadent sexuality. So what do we say now? The questions that we have already hinted out before I immersed into this deep, orgiastic, visionary seeing into the depths of the problem are, we want to ask with Nietzsche and with Heidegger how it is what Elon Musk is rightly criticizing, the willful or kind of obsessed, drug-addicted usage of technology. Where does it have its cause? What are its remedies? So, and then also we join in our discussion Ludwig Klages, the view point of biocentric phenomenology, which I think is the deepest. So first Nietzsche would say that we usually confuse the effect and the cause when we judge a certain phenomena. Okay, what happens in the society? So in this case the question is it, like Socrates would say, that we are not well informed about the damage of the smartphone and that it can do to our physiology? As Elon Musk has pointed out, it is not only listening to us, it is also reprogramming our brain on a physiological basis through the vibration, through the electromagnetic field it generates. I remember as an older man that when the first the handies, the phones, the portable phones were introduced in the 90s of the last century, there was a serious discussion even by physicists and electromagnetic experts at the University of Constance here in Germany, if it should be allowed. And there was interesting protests and analysis that were pointing out that it is going to damage the nervous system of the human being if there are so many posts over the city and standing everywhere and radiating these signals. You see, because you cannot be called, you cannot be reached where you travel somewhere without the fact that the smartphone is, the modern smartphone and even the old handies, they are regularly sending out a signal, a strong signal, so that they can log in into the larger signal field of the sender, of coming from the poles of the telephone companies. Otherwise you would not be reachable, so you have to constantly reunite, and so that the system knows where your number is to be reached. And this vibrating signal, this like a report, I am here, or the machine is here, the smartphone is here, is naturally penetrating your body completely if you have it close to your head or in your trousers in the pocket or stuff like that. And so every 5 minutes or so you are being grilled, and then you wonder why you lose certain creative possibilities, or imagination declines, and feeling of presence in the beauty of nature, that your one moment of wonders disappear, and that you go with your girlfriend and both are sitting with the smartphone and do not experience this exhilaration of a mystery, of the closeness of another soul. No, because the souls are separated and maybe even died, flattened by the constant intervention of the electromagnetic fields. See, these are two fields that are competing with each other: the morphogenetic field of the human soul and the electromagnetic field of the machine. Okay, so this is a description of the fact. Why does it happen? Is it because, like Socrates would say, that we do not know what it is doing, we are not well informed, and that's why we make mistakes? Well, Nietzsche would argue that it is not the fact, it has never been fact in human history. Because knowing something cognitively does not lead to a kind of change of lifestyle if the change of lifestyle, or if the practice of the lifestyle is rooted in degenerated, sorry to say like that, or kind of limited instincts, the drives of the body and emotions of the soul. If the drives of the body or instincts and the emotions of the soul are depleted, then no understanding, no cognitive realization will make a change, because you will, this is the typical Christmas or New Year's Eve, decision. I'm going to stop this. I'm going to start that. I'm going to start to take a cold shower in the morning. I'm going to stop smoking, and I'm going to stop, using the smartphone all the time. First day, wonderful. You do it all, and you feel like, bong, new life is beginning. Bong. Second day, you say, well, I'm already much advanced. I can relax a little bit, just one cigarette and just one, just check the emails, and then in 2 weeks you slide back to your old habits and you say, forget it all, fuck you. There's going to be the Third World War, whatever. I must enjoy life now. Okay, what is speaking out of you are the depleted drives of the body and the depleted or reduced, flattened emotions of your soul. And this is what Nietzsche rightly would call, in one of his conceptions, Nietzsche is not without mistakes, beware, beware. But in the case he is speaking out of this voice, as of his Dionysian wisdom, and says the will to power is identical with life, in the sense that it is the power of the cells of the body, power of the metabolism, and in correlation with it, the natural instincts of the soul and the freshness of emotion. When this is depleted, this is what he calls decadence. The result is that you run away from this emptiness. This is not because you would find the smartphones and the digital world and the fantasies of the movie industry and the political news and the disasters report all over the world in your media. This is not that you find them more beautiful, more exhilarating than your childlike immersion in the playful, creative lifestyle you knew in your childhood, when you were wandering, standing up of a Christmas tree, and the candles were burning, and you were caught in the mystery, and your soul is full of deep and continuous tension and attraction. It attracted you so immensely that you had to stand in front of it. Or then later, in a kind of romantic years, you were wandering in the great, beautiful nature, and you were staring at the stars, at the mountains, at the rivers, and the seas and oceans, and you were, you could not tear your eyes away from it. Why? Because your soul field, the morphogenetic soul field, was so attracted by the larger soul field of the elementary conglomerate, as Whitehead calls them, rivers, mountains, lakes, or even Sheldrake would agree. They all have a kind of informational soul field, even the whole planet, even the sun. They sometimes wrongly call it consciousness. It's not a consciousness, it is a soul field, okay? Consciousness is reserved only to man, and it is, in our conception of biocentric phenomenology, rather life inimical, an enemy of life, because it is one tool of the ego to reduce the passive, extension of the soul field. To be conscious of one thing is always a reduction, always an intention, okay? Always separation between the ego and the object. The passive, what we could call awareness, or I call it the mirror of the soul, is the basis, the living basis out of which all the cognitive functions arise, even consciousness. As an act of the ego, you are conscious, but without the ever vibrating soul field and body perception, there would be no consciousness possible. So let us say Nietzsche would argue that this Socratic explanation is wrong. When you get all the information about it, and this I can agree upon because I have seen it. There were serious scientists and they were explaining it to the audiences at the universities, at some meeting places in the 90s. Allowing to build the poles on the roofs of their houses and so on is going to damage their soul field, and mainly the electromagnetic field of their brains and the nervous system and metabolism and stuff like that. They were even, it was measured in laboratories. But they didn't help. So knowing something cognitively is not going to change your habits. If your soul field and your body drives, instinct have been already so flattened and depleted and exhausted that you are actually a decadent. This is Nietzsche's main argument. The decadent society forces upon itself methods of compensation that enhance this decadence. You see, and we say from the phenomenological point of view that it is the emptiness, the inner emptiness, the loss of the spontaneous wonder and awe. If you just walk in the forest or on the promenade, or if the natural elementary world has lost its attraction for you, the winds, the sun, the waves of the sea, the flowers. I am the only one, and I do it like for many years already, so that I can see it as proof that when I bicycle on the promenade to the tennis club, there are rose bushes, and they smell. You can even smell it on the bike. And I stop and I breathe in and out for like say 30 seconds or 1 minute, trying to get as much as possible, and stick my nose into these rose petals. Sometimes I find a bee inside, and I wonder how she is happy, completely embraced and by those, smells and touches and pollen. What is it called? The yellow little balls that she's collecting as food to turn them into honey. So this is what draws me, so attracts me so strongly that I even risk and accept, and I don't already worry at all about it, that I come too late to the training session or to a match. I don't like to play matches because it is also, again, a willpower exertion which reduces and depletes my soul from the embracement of the phenomenal world. The wind in my hair, the sun on my shoulders, the shape of the trees around the tennis court. I have mastered it. I hope that I can play a match and I still keep true to those elements around me. I watch them, I enjoy them more than the numbers that appear, 6 to 2, 6 to 3, 1540. So this is to me as nothing. It should be, if it's necessary to compete, yes, but play beautifully, elegantly, and do not care about the results. So we say, as Elon Musk has pointed out, we should be informed, that's true, but I would like to point out, if he wants, as he suggested, to build technology that is human friendly, then he should understand what is the essence of the human life. And that means he has to do some serious study in noetics and philosophy and phenomenology. And I can help him because I have been doing it all my life. By the way, the mode of communication I use here is also my creation. It is a fulfillment, I hope, of what Nietzsche was asking for when he pointed out that we have to change the method of a discipline when we come to the end of a certain paradigm. If the analytical thinking, as he has proved, is not going to help us to overcome decadence, that is, as I have said, all the best explanation, do not change your lifestyle if you are, already addicted to it out of emptiness of your soul and body. It is not that the smartphone and the media and whatever modern lifestyle is more attractive than the early childlike lifestyle you had when you were wandering in the forest, in the meadows, walking with your dogs, when you were listening to your playing guitar and going on a canoe with your friends through wild nature, sitting at the fire. Definitely your modern lifestyle, hurrying to work in your car and listening and sending messages and watching the news of catastrophe and earthquake and war and disease and COVID and all the bullshit. It is much worth to live like that. You feel it intuitively. And so you have a kind of sentimental remembrance for your young days, and you like to watch Lord of the Rings sometimes and go for adventure holidays. But all is structured, and it is fake. It is a kind of Netflix, Hollywood movie fake, So what? It is the emptiness of your soul and the reduced perception of your body that forces you to fill the emptiness with an artificial world of fiction, media fiction, okay? So this is to build a technology that would be really human friendly, must understand these deep wisdoms of noetics. It is called the theory of knowledge. It is not a kind of perfect description of what it does. It should be called like phenomenology, better to say. How do we experience the external world and our internal world? The body perceptions is internal now. certainly the perceptions of the body are induced by the signals, material signals from the external world, like light, photons, streams, and acoustic waves, which is thickening, and of the air waves in rhythms, like the pressure of matter on our receptors on the body, like the molecules that hit the receptors in our nose when we smell, okay, and taste buds in our mouth cavity and tongue and stuff like. So these are all material signals, naturally. In a medium of air, matter, sound, light, physical, measurable. Yes, in the laboratory you can test how much of it, luminosity, acoustic, power, loudness, pressure. We can all measure it now. But when it travels through our body from the organs of perception into the mysterious realm of the soul, then you have to leave this kind of quantitative way of evaluating, because you come into the realm of qualities, of qualia, of phenomena. And this is the famous black box, which all neuroscientists have to acknowledge that they do not know. And we say, from a philosophical point of view, never will know, because they will never be able to measure what happens phenomenally in the morphogenetic field of the human soul. They can measure only the brain signals. I always wonder, I studied linguistics and I have a major in theory of communication linguistics, but I belong to the older generation of philosophers who studied first philosophy of language and then linguistics. Because philosophy, after all, is the most important discipline of all sciences, because it answers the question, what is the essence of your field of study? The practical sciences, as Heidegger has pointed out, cannot think properly, deeply, as the philosophers do. Why? Yeah, because they would never come to a pragmatical result in the research and applied technological production. They have to reduce the field of inquiry onto what is measurable. And the essence, the question after the essence of something, is naturally a philosophical question which deals with the immeasurable, okay, that can be only speculated about and has to be felt in deeply in your soul if you are true to your intuitions and visions. So, what do we say? I studied linguistics from the point of view of philosophy of language, and the philosophy of language asks, what is the essence of language? And then we have the answer that it is doublefold. First, you have the level of, historically, the signs, the material stuff that can carry information is later. It's coming later to the human development than the experience, the inner experience that had to be voiced, that had to be, shared. So first there are inner experiences, phenomenal experience of the ape man, and then he's shouting and doing various, grimaces, motions on the face, because there is fire or there is good food nearby, and so an enemy and danger, and slowly these shouts are repeated until they are agreed upon and they mean danger. Animals do this also, and only very much later we come to the proficiency of science, that when we put down the sounds in a graphic manner as a sign, okay, as a sign, and pictorial signs were before the alphabetic signs. So this is the development, and then we have to look upon present language, which is a synchronic perspective. We have a diachronic, the perspective which follows the evolution of some media, let us say, like language. This is the diachronic evolution of it. You also have to understand this. No? And then you have the synchronic. You stop thinking about what is the past, what will be the future. You look at what is happening now. And now you see there are media. They have certain surfaces like screens, and they print on the screens certain, variation of the screen, the pixels now, and it is imitating written letters, and it is imitating photography, pictures or movies, and it is producing sound out of a digital kind of storage now. So these all are material signs. They are not the meaning. A very important difference between signal and meaning. I always ask students of whatever they study, information technology, computer technology, and whatever. Do you know the difference between a signal and information? And invariably, they don't know, because they don't stop and don't think deeply about it. They try to find the answer from some Google or whatever, artificial intelligence, or from some textbook. Now, if you look at it deeply philosophically, then you have the signals carry no meaning, no information. They are simply transfer of inside the medium, the quantity, let us say, of the medium flow differs, and this is carrying the signal like Morse. Morse alphabet is sound, long, or the short, or the no sound. These are the variations, and basically they are quantitative. Okay. In written alphabets or printed alphabets, the quantity difference is the amount of black color that is so used, let's to speak in a detail, to print this letter. It is small, big, thick, long, short. Okay, the trace of the black print color on the paper. So this is again a quantitative difference. Okay. If you have a photography, used to be optical, then you have the influence of the photons, the impressions on the photons on the photogenic film, and it changes it. The molecules of the silver oxide are changed by the incoming photons, either intensively if it is strong light, or less intensively or weakly if it is weak light. And the colors also, there's a question of frequency of the light. Now, what kind of colors are going to come out? So But these are all quantitative changes in the media. Once they, as we have explained, reach the human body surface, there are certain organs of perception, and they carry on in the same way. They only do it inside the human body. The nerves of the human being that carry the signals, and there may be various stages, also chemical and mechanical, but after all, it all finishes in the nerves that are entering the brain, and then we have, quantity of what? Here we have the excitation of the nerve cells induced by the imbalance of the cations and anions on the membrane of the nerve cell. They rush through, there is an imbalance, electromagnetic cause, the potential arises, and the electromagnetic potential is shared by excitation from one cell to the other with a speed roughly about 1 meter per second with this long nerve, and with the intensity of 0.8 milliamperes. Okay, so this is how the human nervous system runs. But this is all quantitative and can be measured and can be traced in the laboratory. But then the black box comes, the mystery that will never be measured and never be understood analytically, purely. That is, that you have heard some words, that you have seen the flowers on the promenade, that you have smelled their inviting smell, that you have seen the hair glistening in the morning sun, and girls body walking swiftly along the promenade with the lake and mountains behind, and you are, moved. You have emotions and pictorial kind of images in your soul field, and this is information. This is information. Your soul field is creating this information. It can never be, produced by catching the last traceable signals in your brain cells and then feeding them as electromagnetic signals into some machine, because the machine does not have a soul, so it can never experience that what you experience. You would have to make a complex algorithmic system that the machine would react to these complexes of signals again in a kind of algorithmic way, and so it produces sounds again and motions, robotic motions, electromotor motions, and kind of sounds for loudspeakers and whatever, so that imitates the human speech, behavior, and motion, but it is still remaining in the realm of quantitatively measurable and transferable signals. There is no soul. So the AI rests on a mistake, confusing signals and information or meaning. No? So why do we have this digression? It is important, if you study philosophy of language, to understand this. No? And then you can say, if the decadence of the human race can be described from a certain point of view, linguistically and kind of information theory approach, that the quantum of signals start to, suppress the meaning, the experience, the phenomenal qualia, the qualitative experience, then we have a problem. Then the passive involvement, the surprise, the joy of being alive and passively taking part in the beauty of nature and in the emotional depth of our fellow human beings and animals, not to forget the animals, they all have souls and they are much happier than we are, if with the exception of when we mass produce them for food now, or when we terrorize them as our pets, because the animals don't have an ego, don't have a kind of cognitive series of willful acts that will reinterpret their instinctual drives and their emotional qualities, their feelings. So to fully participate in nature with plants, similarly, plants have souls and bodies, different from the animals and different from us, but nevertheless they are, rooted to one place, but they have much more intense soul relationship with the elementary forces of the planet, the wind, the rain, the sun is a cosmic influence, and the relationship to cosmos, the moon and the sun and the stars, because they have what? Metaphorically speaking, they have time enough for that because they don't move from one place, so they get a real good picture of this one place and the changes of the winds and the sun and the seasons and the morning and the evening and stuff like that. So to make a big jump back to the first question, is it possible by explaining the dangers of modern technology to man, of today's man, to re-educate him, to to persuade him to change his habits, as Socrates would say, because he was going to the market and in Athens and was involving the citizens in this philosophical discussions about mainly moral questions, if they know what is the truth, what is love, what is friendship, what is bravery, and so, and by confusing them and by pretending that he does not know, the famous sentence of Socrates, I know that I know nothing, for sure, it means they started to think, and he supposed that this is what is re-education, that is, he is like helping for the new ideas to be born in their souls. Okay, but Nietzsche would attack this and say this is an illusion, because only those who were out of their body kind of quality and soul quality already disgusted with a certain lifestyle would make the change. Okay, this is his conception of will to power as biological constitute. He has a different conception of will to power also, which is a cognitive will to power, which to my interpretation is wrong, or is the expression of decadence. This is the will to power of the ideology systems, that I have a strong will to make you behave like I want, like I command, and I invent trickery systems and cheating systems and educational system and even more persuasion, violence, fear systems to make you comply. This is also will to power. But it is not the biological will to power of life, it is the cognitive ego and superego will to power. And Nietzsche was not sure in his whole work what is the right definition, and he was speaking once in this way and once in the other way, and if you do not separate this, you will be confused eternally when reading Nietzsche. So we refuse this cognitive superego institutional will to power. We interpreted it as already an expression of decadence in Nietzsche's term, because these masterminds and rulers and manipulators and ideologues and fake new inventors, whatever you want, do not live happily, creatively as artists, as farmers, as lovers, as sportsmen, as travelers in a rewarding passive union with the beauty of Mother Nature and friendly creation with their friends. They are devoid of all this, they are empty, and that's why they express themselves by controlling the others, by commanding the others. This is not a gain from our point of view, it's an expression of a loss. So, to the big question, how to change the situation in the interest of life, if possible at all. As Nietzsche has pointed out, the change of method is necessary at the end of a paradigm. I have mentioned that my way of thinking about these questions is this one, which I call the method of the old bards, to stop my thinking to fall into the trap of analytic cognition, simply, repeating the phrases and information I have gathered as a student of linguistics, philosophy, and communication theory. I must enhance the soul field, the emotion, the qualia, the experience phenomena, and I use the vibration of the string on my head and chest to achieve this. After some time, I have to change the position of the guitars because the body perceptions were, on a certain part of my skull and a certain part. I continue with the guitar on other part of my body. So, I put now the guitar with the neck downwards. Before that, it was with the neck upwards, resting on my brow. Now it is with the belly of the guitar resting on my brow and chest and stomach and the neck pointing down. And obviously, I'm lying on a bardic divan, Bard's divan. Otherwise, this would be difficult because I need a horizontal position of the body so that I don't have to care about keeping the posture. Vertical posture is also an analogous of the control of the ego. Né? If you want to stand upright and lecture, you already have slightly departed from the passive wanderer's creative mode in which you can be surprised by suddenly associating and appearing images and emotions. So that's why lying down on the divan, vibrating the skull and the heart and stomach is a paradigm change for lecturing about philosophical questions. By a long circle, we return to the first bards of the pre-Greek times, like Homer, 12th century BC, certainly was not, writing his. If there was a Homer like this, probably not, but there were bards who were telling the stories at the marketplace, maybe, or in some, temples or at the fireplace in the evening, and they were listened to, and the listeners were stricken by awe because it was beautiful for them. It was a different world was open in front of their eyes, and emotions were induced in their souls. And it would be a kind of comedy to make a film like this, and then say Homer or other bards gather the congregation, a group at the fireplace, and now he puts out a smartphone from his bag and say, okay, you have the Troya app, you have the Ilias, and you have the Odyssey. Please turn on the Odysseus app and go to, chapter 5. Let's, do it now. No. He was waiting until he got the vision. That means his soul field and the soul fields of all the listeners was, open wide, and this naturally asks for an ontology of bardic performances. The ontology says that the informational fields of a certain landscape keep vibrating. They have a kind of memory of all whatever happened in this locality. Supra-individual memory, which, by the way, as far as human thinking deeply about it is concerned, even Heidegger acknowledges, and he calls it die Gedächtnis, the memory, supra-individual memory of all that ever was thought and spoken about in a deep philosophical way. This cluster, this cloud of information remains independent of individual human beings vibrating in a certain landscape. And it is up to the depth of the soul field of the bard if he can unite with it. The best bards had the deepest and largest soul field that naturally asks for the explanation of the ontology of the soul field. What is the soul field? Well, we use the analogy of the electromagnetic field. You have the electromotor with its stator and rotor, which has metallic parts that are measurable. And then you have it, when it is functioning, it produces an electromagnetic field. This one is also measurable, but not visible for the human eye. And it spreads through all the parts of the hardware machinery, yet it stretches far away beyond the hardware machinery into the space. and you can measure it how far it stretches. Soul field, the human soul field is like the optical lake, could be imagined in the similar way. Body is the hardware, all the cells and the bones and the sinews and the heart and the lungs and the brain cells and the skull and the feet. Everything is the hardware, measurable. Nerve system, measurable transfer of signals and so on. But the soul field stretches far away from the hardware body. It penetrates naturally all the cells of the body, but it stretches far and far away from the body. And that is why it can be attracted from the supra-individual fields, either of nature, like the clouds, like the sun, like the silvery dancing sunlight on the waves of the lake, like the smell of the rose on the road, like the beautiful hair and shoulder line and hip of a muse that is walking on the promenade. In my case, okay, it can be attracted. To be attracted, it had to be, dynamic and spreadable, stretchable, so it is drawn into the other field. That's why there is passivity needed. You have to let it go. The old man, before the invention of writing, didn't have to give himself kind of a willful command. Let go. Be passive. Enjoy life. This is our problem. In the old times, before the invention of writing, the body and soul were completely in harmony with the larger soul fields and bodies of nature. They were like, living passively, enjoying. They certainly were falling in love. They were certainly angry, and they hated something, and they could have been jealous. I think they were not jealous in our sense because they didn't have the strong ego, but by natural repulsion of certain soul fields, they were disgusted with something which they didn't like. Mainly expressions of death, life decadence, disease. Okay, we are different. We have traversed this condition, transfer this condition to the domination of the willpower of the ego over the soul. And that's why we have the therapist and the philosopher and the artist who say us, let go. But isn't it a paradox? You have to give yourself a will command not to will anymore. So this is a paradoxical command. That's why it cannot be done. And all the talking therapies actually are not achieving that what they are dreaming about. By cognitive understanding of the human problem, like Freud, analysis, like the Socratic method, like you have to understand it and then it will be okay, you will stop doing it. This is a misunderstanding of the relationship between soul, body, and ego, or cognition, or consciousness, which is basically, in our conception of the enemy of Gaussian phenomenology, a latent or manifest enemy of life. Always the ego, the consciousness, all the acts of the ego, which we call like consciousness, self-consciousness, objectified perception, okay, which reduces the phenomena into objects, conceptual thinking, which reduces the phenomena and emotions into definitions, and egoistic acts of willpower. I want this, I don't want that. These are all acts of cognition. And they are, in our interpretation, always, in a certain level, inimical to life. They can be harnessed, they can be banded, they can be utilized by the life force for its own interests of survival. This is good. This is good. This is the predicament of the human race. We have risen out of the animal kingdom and we have overcome elementary forces and dangerous diseases, and by our rational capacity. But at the same time, we have destroyed our spontaneous ability to follow nature passively. I would surmise that the most sharp thinking and utilization of reason has grown in face of human facing a human, not human facing a nature. The human intrigues and bad intentions have forced other humans to become smart. And then the decadence of a certain strata of human society has forced them to become very smart, to survive and control those that were less decadent, to work for them. So we are so proud about our rational ability, that we should also accept that it is self-produced out of fear with regard to other human beings' activities, and that it brings a great danger with itself, the loss of spontaneous ability to be at home, to enjoy life truly, passively, like children again. And you see today, the permanent wars, the permanent arguments, they're talking and talking and talking and talking everywhere, and nothing really goes in the way of permanent peace and creative lifestyle, especially terrible for children who are born into this hell of war, hunger, misinformation, perversion, and so on. So, yes, this was a mistake. What I overheard somebody knocking on the philosopher's door, which is not advisable now. I live in the student community. I had to reduce all my expenses drastically to be able to study deeply philosophy, history, art, medicine, sport, and whatever, and find new methods for everything. At the end of the paradigm, as Thomas Kuhn has written, the change will come only when the old guys from the ruling paradigm, they die off, and the young guys who were on the periphery doing something questionable, as the old guys would say, they fall into the center, and then the new paradigm can break through. And this is very much the case of Elon Musk, who really came from, I don't know where, certainly not from nowhere. but he is really changing a lot, and he is well aware of the necessity of the freedom of information. His platform X, to Twitter and now X, is absolutely necessary. Thank you for that, Elon. I'm trying to be inspired, to let myself be inspired and shown by Mother Gaia what kind of technology would be in harmony with her, human technology, because we are here, and there are a lot of poets and there are a lot of artists who have loved nature very much, and farmers and craftsmen. So this is not a mistake that we are here. We have to read Heidegger intensely, understand him, what he was talking about when he had these lectures, 1955 roughly. What is the essence of technology, die Frage nach der Technik, and how we should use it. So his advice is based on the analysis similar to mine. As long as our machines were kind of easily interpreted by the body perception, like the fire, like the watermill, like mechanic devices, like, the bards sitting at the fire and playing on the lute and explaining the mythology. And this was not a machinery, it was a kind of cultural information transfer. But the machinery, even the steam machine, still can be felt with your body perception. The power can be felt, like if you're cooking potatoes and the steam is pressing, on the top of the pot, and it is jumping, and you can imagine, you can utilize this for energy production, the steam. Once you get into electricity, it becomes problematic because you turn on and off switches and you do not know what actually happens. Like 3 weeks ago, there was an electrician in my room in the student community, and he wanted to change some light bulbs because it is the house is under the control of the city. So they do everything, in one stroke. They change all the light lamps according to a certain procedure. And he came just in the moment when I was working, as I call it, philosophizing, lying on my mat, because I don't have a bed. Everything has to be reduced if you want to get into the essence. That's why I admire Elon Musk, that he lives also in a simple house, you see, even though he is a very rich person and he could have 17 sleeping rooms in some private beach house in Florida or whatever. But this is logical. This is what destroys all those rich people who came to riches not out of deep consideration of the human situation, but by simply, quantitative exploitation of material production and money selling and money investing. And this is hardcore materialism. And if you want to ask the deep question, you have to reduce all your even personal property. The property like cars, houses, bathrooms, airplanes, whatever you can think of if you are rich, it's always binding you. And by the media of, the communication with them, by using them, You are always pulled more and more into the technosphere, and you lose the plasticity of your soul to passively listen to the essence of human life and the life of nature. So you have to, as Nietzsche says, a certain kind of poverty. This is called the good poverty. Not having too many objects around you, not having too many duties and time tables is necessary for a true philosopher. The true philosopher is not the professor of philosophy at the university who is hurrying to his lectures at 10:15 in the morning, and he has his lecture plan for the week, and he gets his money and insurance or whatever and a tenure, because he's not free to be surprised, to stop standing at all, because he was, he had a sudden insight which he has to elaborate on in an almost religious, mystical way by, worshipping the cloud of information that is, descending into his soul, or ontologically speaking for us, into which he is being drawn. His soul field is being sucked into the wisdom field of Mother Gaia. It is reported somewhere that even Socrates, with whom we do not agree, but when he first came upon the idea that there could be concepts, before Socrates, mostly people were not thinking in an abstract way. They were using words to name their experiences. No? They could basically talk only about that which was present in front of their eyes, which could they touch, and so on. Socrates then came upon the idea that if we remove all the individual qualities of our perceptions, that we can achieve some kind of definition of what a certain phenomenon, this vision of this tree, vision of that tree, and the third tree, and the tree in the garden of my friend, they all have certain measurable, necessary quantities, like the stem, the crown, the roots, the leaves, the fruit. Okay, and if we describe the tree like that, then we have kind of abstract definition of what is a tree as a concept. When this idea of concepts for the first time dawned on him, he had to lie down. Truly, he could not stand on his legs, similarly as I do now when I want to let myself be elevated and sucked into the informational field, the soul of the planet Gaia, Sophia, at the beginning of the 21st century. First quarter is already gone, and we are at the brink of self-destruction. Then this is necessary, that the Mother Gaia, the biosphere of the earth, the information field, or the Akashic records, whatever you call it, you always have to give functional definitions. I am disgusted that speakers, journalists, politicians, scientists, whoever dares to speak in the public has not been educated in linguistic and rhetoric art. know that to be true to the question, you have to listen passively. So the bards lie in the horizontal position and they let themselves be made, imprinted, inspired. It's like being in love, and true philosophers are really in love with wisdom. That's why for Nietzsche, in all his works, wisdom and philosophy and life are always females, logical. They are his muses. He is in love with them. And every deep philosopher is, and deep artist is. It's the eros. It is the eros of the moment. This is what all lovers forget, that the erotic power, erotic enchantment is a passive phenomena of the moment. It cannot be repeated like on a production line. Like if I put all these ingredients into my life, I will again fall in deep love. Deep love under the wings of cosmogonic eros is always the moment in which it happens is unique, because the planet is rushing through the universe. It is turning, the seasons are changing, the cells of your body are dividing and growing, your soul field is dancing and stretching, and if it all is tuned perfectly, two soul fields, man and woman, boy and a girl, or even artist and the sunlight, or the lover of nature and a tree, or a lover of nature and an animal, they will be sucked in, and the key snaps to the lock, and they will have this rapport and unity of soul field, union. This is the true unio mystica. The unio mystica that the Christians theologians have conceived was an abstract willpower act that considered, they thought about it cognitively. The whole Middle Ages, for 1,000 years, they were straining their willpower to unite the, extremely demanding ontology, image of the created universe and the God and the angels, whatever. They were trying to unite it with the phenomenal experiences of their soul and bodies, and it was an impossible task. That's why they had to exert enormous willpower to unite it in all those treatises. And their image of an unio mystica was a forced illusion that an ego of a one man can unite with a projected superego of some off-planet god that created everything. Nietzsche would say, well, it was far after all, it was a projection of the desire from control and for control of everything. Now, of a week ago, basically, of a decadent body and soul. No? We have to return before Socrates, definitely before the Christian theologians, and before even Socrates. That's why I am probably the only one, together with Ludwig Klages and J.J. Bachhofen, Johann Jakob Bachhofen, and some other modern feminist philosophers who have discovered the great mother cultures and religions of the pre-Mediterranean times, the so-called Pelasgians. the Mediterranean, East Mediterranean, mainly from Crete, Minoan Crete, before the arrival of the Indo-European tribes from Asia, the later Greeks. This is a lost paradise, a lost Atlantis, but it can be phenomenally re-experienced, and it can be used because it's calling us as a kind of guideline of how our everyday could be formed if we allow the mother, the earth, the phenomena, the experience passively to form us, so that we come to the final difficult question which I was evading all the time. How could the technology should look if we want to follow this advice of Elon Musk and Heidegger and Nietzsche and Klages, to use it? Mainly Heidegger was the last one, because he was the one who lived in the middle of the 20th century, so he knew already the disastrous influence of modern technology in the First and Second World War. What was his advice? The so-called Gelassenheit. Use it with a kind of distance acceptance. We use modern technology only if it enhances our true life. That's why I have had a digression, a long digression, to explain what a true life is. In the arms of the Great Mother, under the wings of cosmogonic eros, that is, the soul field in a healthy body passively expands and unites, is being drawn into larger soul fields. This is the ecological idea, and then it is inspired and can then embody. This is another ontological step. When the two fields, soul field, two informational fields unite, they immediately start to embody that which was created between them in this union. It is like man and a woman. When they love each other, they will unite and they will embody their love in a child. Similarly, artists in love with the landscape will unite his soul with the landscape soul and embody it in his painting, in his statue, in his artwork, in his composition, musical composition. Similarly, a philosopher, a deep philosopher, not the teacher at the school who teaches simply history or philosophy, but the creative philosopher who can set his own values. True philosophy is always re-evaluation of the old values, not criticizing them, like saying it was all wrong, because he knows it was all necessary. This is one of Nietzsche's great maxims. Everything what happened so far happened necessarily. So even the Middle Ages, even the loss of the Pelasgian paradises, the arrival of the Greeks, the conceptual thinking of the Greeks with Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, and so on, was an expression of necessity. We have lost the childish innocence. Why? Because it is the usual, normal way of growing up. And the mother, and in this case our Gaian mother who created, in our conception of Pelasgian origins, she created the genome of man, and she gave him this creative capacity of imagination, that is the capacity to spread, widen his soul field very far away from his body so that he can be inspired, so that he can live fully and experience the essences of all plants, trees, animals, winds, lakes, mountains, and like that coming closer to her, because she is the goddess, the mother, as used to be on Pelasgian Crete. She is the mother, she is the landscape. Her physical body is this earth. In this way, it is very similar to what John Lamlash, the great knowledgeable man of the 21st century, has described in his very deep book, Not in His Image. John Lamlash, similar point of view as we have. So we come to this question, why did we lose the paradises? Well, why did we lose individual childhoods? Because we evolve and the mother changes into a lover. You see, even on old Pelasgian times, the goddess could incarnate as an old woman, wisdom, as a young boy, a young girl, which the father and the grandfather worship, and but also as a mature woman, as a lover of a hero, of a philosopher, of a bard, of a farmer, of a craftsman, artist, and so on. And to fall in love, she has to be attracted to this man. Okay. And to be attracted to him, it cannot be faked. He really has to be attractive in the sense that his wisdom and his beauty and his creation and all that stuff can attract even the muse, even the goddess. And that's why she had to give him freedom to make mistakes. You see, it's a similar but different to the Abrahamic concept of the God creating a man and giving him a free will to commit sins, okay, to be punished. It's slightly less terroristic, our conception of the Great Mother creating a man, giving him creative imagination so that he can recognize her. She does not give him the creative imagination to commit sins and to be punished, which is slightly kind of a double bind. As Gregory Bateson would point out, it would be a mother which forces her child into a double bind position. The mother loves and punishes at the same time. Whatever the boy does, especially if he's a boy, is not right. If he runs away from the mother, he hurts her love. If he stays, she's going to punish him and destroy his life. It's also wrong. It's a double bind. So we could psychoanalytically accuse the Abrahamic system of God-man creation as being a cage of double bind terror. Very interesting. One of the signs of the bardic performance, it's not a performance, of a deep dive into the ontology of the souls, the soul fields, into what it actually is happening on this planet, is that you were surprised as a bard where it did take you, because you don't plan it. That's why it is not possible to have these lectures at the university from 10:15 to 11 now. At the 12, you have to be in the horizontal position and lose all egoistic conceptions of time and space. You're being sucked into the realm of inspiration. So, what was the last image I was given? It was the mother who wants to become a lover. And for the she's giving freedom, creative imagination to her child to become a man that could be loved by her, that could be attractive to her. If you expand it on the whole mankind, then the planet, the biosphere of the planet Earth, wants to live in harmony with the human race, which is the creative animal. She could live forever with the tigers and elephants and rivers and lakes and winds, but would not be, she would not be growing. That's why I surmise she has obliterated the reptiles, because they were here for 165 million years, a dominant species and no development. So they were erased. The human being, with all its antecedents, squirrels and apes, mammals of all kinds, may have some 5 million years compared with those reptiles. 160 million. So beware, beware. If Mother sees us to go like this for another 100 years, she will obliterate us, because we don't need millions with our technology. We need only 5 years to destroy everything. So, finally, we dare to face this question: how the technology should look, how it should be used. We have already from Heidegger the advice: use it with Gelassenheit, which is distance acceptance. You do not react. If your telephone is buzzing, you do not have to answer. That's why you turn it off, as I always turn it off. And I turn it on only when I need to find orientation for the moment, when the necessity arises to know if I have some friends, appointments, and meeting or work or something like that. And then it's like 5 minutes and I turn it off again. And people get used to that. They can send messages, but they must not expect that you are online. Be like a dog is online, on a line. And always in the history of mankind, it was all the attribute of the slaves and the servant to be on a line, reachable all the time. Like the English noble houses, the Lord would pull down a rope and the bell would ring in the basement where the servant was, waiting for the bell to bring whatever, to ask what has to be done. So it is the attribute of the master of his fate not to be reachable by these smartphones and computers or whatever, because you need the master of fate. What is it? This is the one who knows that everything happens necessarily in your life, but to open your soul field to those necessary influences, you have to be passively open and free to let yourself be called, sucked in, and the calls of nature, the call of the wild, is never a signal, never a bell, never a time strictly defined
signal series. It is a premonition. It is a calling. It is an intuition. Naturally, because the merging of your soul field with the larger soul field of the landscape you live in and the social informational fields you are involved in, if they are necessary, if they are answering the desiring extensions of your soul, they grow into your soul field slowly, because they do not want to overpower you. The mother who seeks a lover on a planetary mystical scale is not, commanding her. If you command somebody to love you, there is no love. It has to be a passive surprise and a moment of union for both lovers that is filled with awe and reverence, and it has to grow for a long time. So this is a master of one's fate, not the one who is giving commands all around like a crazy, commander in a military operation. This is the decadent one who has lost his fate completely. And what remains to him are only acts, commanding acts of the willpower, of the wrongly understood willpower, which is a cognitive willpower of the ego or the superego, institutions, military, churches, school, government, and so on. So we see it is. So now we have it all. How the technology could be looking, how it should be calling us. I think it could be speculated upon if more gifted individuals like that would improvise on it in this bardic way. Okay, we need some philosophers, some artists, some engineers to dive into this visionary space of how a computer, how a communication device could be shaped. Now that will be suddenly a great disgust with our method on the side of those great companies who produce smartphones, millions of pieces, and computers and cars and whatever. This is all material stuff that is making the human beings to communicate faster and move faster and whatever, as if there would be an advance to go from some town on the surface of the earth to another town on the other side of the planet and hurry and do the same soul-killing and planet-killing acts of overcoming obstacles. You see, the wrongly understood will to power overcomes obstacles always. It forces its plan, its agenda on life, be it on the planetary life or social life or one individual. And it has a kind of success experience only in the moment of overcoming, of breaking down the resistance, the obstacle on its way of controlling everything. Once the hindrance is broken, suddenly this will to power flows into emptiness, because it is not true in the sense it is not ontologically fed and united with some other life force. It is an abstract cognitive act of will and destroys life actually. And it cannot unite with the destroyed life. So it lands in emptiness and must immediately look around for another obstacle to overcome, because only in the moment of overcoming of resistance it experiences its power. That's why Nietzsche correctly but wrongly in our sense, but logically consistently in his view, when he says the proof of power is the growth of power. Okay? Nietzsche is honest, let us say. He's very, very honest. If he makes mistakes, he keeps going on in making these mistakes. He does not excuse himself, because he say, why should I excuse myself for what I said yesterday? This is very strange in him. It can be accepted and said, okay, if we jump back to the correctly understood will to power, which is biological, which is the metabolism of your body, that have the correlations in the emotions and images, feelings of your soul, then if you are healthy, truly healthy and strong, then your creative capacity rises. You can make long journeys. You can climb mountains. You can work in the fields. You can work with the bulls and cows and horses as I did. You can be a professional sportsman for some time. You go on and on. You enlarge your field of experience, but it is always the calling of some realm, be it agriculture, art, philosophy, sport, that is calling you and embracing you. Metaphorically speaking, your mother creator is making you grown up, and all aspects of your personality, of your character, let us say better, of your character. Character is the union of body and soul, and personality is the adjustment of your body and soul heritage, if you have from your parents and the landscape and tradition and tribe and family and culture, an adjustment to your ego. You will have a personal character, whereas landscapes and animals have only character. So the ego always adjusts the character to its needs. The inherited potential is the character. So if on this way of being passively passed on from one realm of human possibility to the other, of creative possibility, this is your character is growing, deepening, and you become like gods, ladies and gentlemen. And only then you become what Nietzsche would call Superman, a man who has embodied in his body and soul all his inherited potential. That's why he must be what Nietzsche calls a lucky throw of fate. In him, traditions of thousands of years of a certain tribe have collected the best heritage. And certainly, not to praise Elon Musk, but to point out to the fact that he is a very gifted person, character, let us say, and he managed to be so creative in so very many fields of the modern 21st century. And it speaks for him that even in the field where he is most successful in the informational technology, he sees the danger of it. Because his original motivation was certainly the, let us say, quote unquote, truth, better to say in phenomenological terms, actuality. An experience of life that is close to the ontological truth, that is, it's rewarding. You are really getting to the core of the problems. For that, you have to be passively open and listen to them. That's why he also lives a kind of simple life, né? Economically, let's say. So I'm always evading this question, which is the most important. How should the smartphone look like if it is, life supporting? So certainly, it must be turned off completely, but absolutely completely, so that it cannot hook into any, it can join into any network. So the battery must be removable. Then the surface should be very simple. Like I was given a smartphone by my friends who already wanted me to have one. I didn't have one until this week now. And I said, remove all this bullshit there. I just only want to have, when I turn it on, there should be 4 or 5 maximum signs that are important for me, like telephone, telegram, and what else? I don't even use internet on the smartphone. It is, the screen is too small. Okay. First, I'm actually one of those smart guys who was working on artificial intelligence already in the 1980s at the University of Constance, where we started to develop memory banks out of a linguistic and philosophical point of view, how a certain field of knowledge could be represented logically for at least logically in a kind of notation of logic, and then passed on to programmers who would program it in algorithmic language, and so on. I was even writing poems with computers at the time were, like big monsters that filled half a room, and were cards, the punch cards were the program. I would feed a language sentence structure with sufficient items of nouns and verbs and adverbs, and a syntactical structure into, and a program how to combine it into a semantically logical sentence, and then spin out all permutations. And like there would come 1,000 of sentences, and I would read them, and I would mark those that would sound poetical, like poetry, and then I would find like 10 that were truly like taken from some poem. But who was doing this interpretation? I was. Human soul that also studied literature and as a result of poetry. The computer was only spitting out permutations of signals. You know already that. So at that time I was wondering, when the first computers, there was the time when there was a first terminal at the whole university, one terminal for internet only. And I was thinking about how it should be made more human friendly. And I already had at the time this image that later was realized in some science fiction films, that you have a three-dimensional space and you have a certain glove that reacts to the electromagnetic field of this three-dimensional space, and you move the signs, symbols directly in space with your hand, not with the mouse, on a flat two-dimensional screen. So this is one suggestion. We live in a three-dimensional world, so the informational devices should be three-dimensional. The best would be like, from those science fiction films, you put a small crystal in front of you and you command it to connect with a network. The other question is, are the networks good for our health? This is what has to be really investigated. As I have told you, in the 90s, there was great criticism of 1G, 2G, 3G, or whatever. So this has to be reasonably and truly considered, how the electromagnetic fields of the communication devices, the poles, the sending devices, how do they affect human cells and human souls? Elon Musk has hinted you turn the smart off. Just because of that, it is reprogramming your brain with certain frequencies. So this has to stop. So other device possible would be to have beautiful kind of architecture like temples of communication in the landscape that would not be sending Wi-Fi signals, that would have hardcore wiring, and that would be a temple of communication. They would be small or large, they would be enough of them, they would be kind of architecturally adapted to the nature. It could be even like a tree to which you can talk now, okay? But they would have no wireless signaling. It will be all solid internet. And there you would enter, and you would be greeted maybe by a student of information sciences who would make a practicum, say, "Welcome, you want to talk to the net. Beware that it should help you to live more fully, more deeply." So this is the question. And then the surface of this communicating devices, I said, very simple, very reduced. That's it. That's my suggestion. Transportation. Elon Musk is into trains, cars, and rockets. Well, the basic question must be asked: why do we want to be somewhere so quickly? Only to do the same nonsense which we did as we were in the first place. That is, being cut off the morphogenetic fields of the landscape and losing the fullness of life. Traveling slowly enables you to live through the changes of landscape, climate, and so on. So you are all the time in real world. This is what I like in expeditions, like mountain bike expedition, or even travel home expedition, where you just, say, you drive a little bit in the afternoon, and in the evening you find yourself a nice place, and you stay there, and you have the whole morning till after lunch to be on a nice place. And enjoy the slow union with the wind, the rocks, the stones, the trees, the sea, the mountains. Or even better, your evening destination could be a farm or a place of handcraft that welcomes visitors. You come there, you park your travel home, and in the morning you take part in the agricultural activities and in the craftsman production and whatever, and you talk with the lunchtime with your guests, and you enjoy it. Maybe you stay 2 weeks. This should be a program for young students, travelers, craftsmen, whatever, the traditional European wanderings, space travel. I have a special approach to space travel because I'm persuaded that this method of burning some explosive fuel behind the hind part of the vehicle is stupid. It is not going to get us anywhere in this wide space. Some kind of propelling them with atomic explosions and speeding up is also possible, but it will never get us into hyperspace. Some sun sails that are traveling very fast, too little and boring to be there, like a dead man in some stasis, in some incubation. I feel like everything in this world, even in this cosmos, runs on these morphogenetic fields of sympathetic emotion, vision, so that the contact with other species is more probable to happen to me on this divan as a bard, that I will get a vision of another intelligent life, because it agrees with the ontological premise that the soul field is not limited by time and space. Its expansion is not limited by three-dimensional time and space. As Rupert Sheldrake has proved also with his experiment with, the dogs, and the owner of the dog is coming back home and the dog knows it. In the instant when the owner is still like 1 hour car drive away, that in the moment he decides to go home, and it must be honest experiments, they must be really honest, these people, that in the moment they see the image of the dog and they say, well, my doggy is alone, I have to go home. In this moment, there is an entanglement between the soul field of the owner and the dog. And the dog feels it, like his beloved lord is coming, and he immediately jumps out, goes to the window and sits and looks out. I have seen it myself. I have had these experiences myself, so I completely agree. And then the owner comes, and even though he comes from a different direction or a different car, the dog faithfully sitting there, because the rapport has been closed, the two fields have united. So if you expand it on a cosmic scale, then when we first get in harmony with our planet, this is the precondition. Nobody is going to contact us if we are like idiots running around and burning our own planet and killing ourselves. This is the generation. This is actually, it is repulsing, as it is repulsing to all poets and intuitive, sensitive people to take part in violence. It is repulsing for the interplanetary sympathy between planetary intelligences. They simply turn away from us, disgusted. Especially when we depict them in the Hollywood monster films, like, some slimy monsters. So forget about the rockets now. Forget about the exploitation of Mars and other satellites now. This planet is so rich if we can live in harmony with it. first make our planet a home, a true home, and then by necessity our intelligences will call upon us. So I hope I have given some ideas to Elon Musk. More can be achieved in a cooperation of engineers that are feeling that all this is right, and they want first be human beings, lovers, fathers, mothers, craftsmen, and farmers, and travelers, and sportsmen, and then engineers. Okay? Then not a brainstorming, but soul union. And for that, the methods of communication have to be new ones at the end of the paradigm. It cannot be expected to achieve new results if you use all the time the same methods. And then when the soul union in a kind of temple of wisdom on a nice, beautiful nature spot, we shall be given the answers. We do not know them before. This is in accordance with one of the greatest present-day philosophers of Germany, Jürgen Habermas, who has coined the concept of the communicative truth. Truth, as considered by the logicians and by old philosophers, is a correspondence theory between an information and reality. If you have a sentence on the blackboard, it is raining outside, this is an information. First, we already know that these are signals of white chalk on a black background, and you interpret these signals as a meaningful information telling you it is raining outside. Then you check the reality, you look out of the window, and it is a fact. You perceive the rain, so you say this sentence is true. This is correspondence theory of truth. The communicative theory of truth is different. You gather into a temple of wisdom with the engineers, the bards, the philosophers, the artists, and politicians maybe, who are already themselves tuned well to life, and then you let your soul fields expand and you communicate. It is advisable to have the guitar as a vibrating instrument, or some drums, or a piano, whatever. The physiological way of how to bring your brain and nervous system into a rhythmic vibration, which stops you from thinking abstractly, conceptually, willfully, and trying to press some ideological solutions on the other participants. So this will be the soul storming, quote unquote, but we will call it soul embracing soft winds of Mother Gaia. And then the communicative theory of truth says we will achieve, we will arrive, we will be united, our soul fields will be united, and all together, first individually, but then all together, united with the soul fields of the local landscape of the planet Earth. And then we achieve a certain decision. We come to wisdom and we formulate it together and we say this is the truth we have achieved in the process of communication, and it is valid, and everybody has to stick to it 100% when we close this session. Then when we meet to the next session, we can change it, because a different maybe communicative truth shall be born. So this is the communicative truth theory of Jürgen Habermas, and this is very reasonable. We are not arguing among ourselves about the meaning of the words, because the words used like that are concepts, ideas, ideologies, and they are defined in the dictionaries with a lot of other words, and the interpretation of those many other words that describe the definition of a concept are again prone to misinterpretation, and so you never come to a conclusion, never come to an agreement, because language of this kind of language is actually completely separated from phenomenal actuality. We are talking heads devoid of reality, and that's why you are decadent, that's why you are dissatisfied, that's why you are empty, and that's why you recourse to despotism, commands, history, and you name the other guys, like disinformation and terrorists and whatever, desolate figures and cheaters and ideologues, because you have no other argument. You don't have a rapport to reality. And I think this is very much spread in the media and the political discussions and in the corporations, unfortunately, where profit and pragmatic thinking and persuasion is more important than being in contact with life. So Elon Musk again has proved that he is an exception in this world. Like he has defended Twitter, very great heroic act of the modern time. He doesn't have to go like the Knights of the Round Table to search for love of his life or for the Holy Grail. He simply saves Twitter to be a freedom platform for communication. Without free communication, no hope for mankind. I tell you this. And so again, his deep soul has hinted to him very many times during his working days or conversation days and walks in nature that something is wrong with the communication world. Now he has achieved the kind of stage of aesthetic approach. Stop it. Don't use it. Several of them were warning, don't use artificial intelligence. Dangerous. But we have to look up it philosophically and say the wires, the screens, the cables, the plastic and rubber, they are zwar soulless, they have no souls because they are made of materials that have been excavated from the earth as raw materials, like the dead bodies of animals sedimented under great pressure, and coal sedimented under great pressure were original plants. Now they are, real living sediments in the body of the earth, so they have also a kind of soul field. But once you excavate them and bring them to a laboratory or a factory and homogenize them under fire, pressure, steam, acidity, radioactive, whatever, you get a dead homogeneous matter without a soul. Isn't it an terrible image? The body of the Mother Earth has been tortured to become dead material. Out of this, the machines are produced. According to what? According to conceptual ideas about how matter behaves, physics, chemistry, and so on. Result are machines, which we call in biocentric phenomenology artifacts, soulless agglomerations of homogenized matter that have certain functions, driven by electricity mainly today. So, how to make the artifacts living again? Well, we probably will not finish to return back to oracles, like where there was a human soul induced by some intoxicating flames in Delphi, and speaking out of a rapture. Even though, if she would be really connected to the soul of the planet Earth and connected to the soul of the one who puts the question, she could see true potential. But this is only for exceptionally honest and truly gifted individuals, so they do not project their egos. They have to know the method how to dissolve the ego first before you to go to any trance. And then you have also to have an ontology of the spiritual world, which is life supporting, that you do not expect monsters, evil, some spirits from hell, or aliens that want to manipulate you. We have to stick to that childlike, true love to our mother planet who loves us, and there are basically no other dimensions. There are no hells and no heavens as in the Pelasgian worldview. This comes only later, when this world is destroyed, first by the Greeks, then by the Romans, then by the Abrahamic religions, then by the idealistic philosophies and stuff like that, and by modern science, with all these parallel universes and dimensions. We shall return to the body of Mother Earth and the soul of Mother Earth. It is stupid to shout around and look over the fence to the neighbor garden and commanding him how he should grow plants and build his house, when your own garden is full of bullshit, weeds, nothing grows, and your house is a prison. First, we have to be the gardeners of our home planet, and then we can, as I already hinted, hope that communications with other intelligences will be possible according to the principle of attraction of the similar and repulsion of the dissimilar. Well, I feel depleted now in this positive sense. I have flown far away. I will send this to Elon Musk to enjoy listening and suggest further cooperation in this passive bardic way. Soul widening, soul, soft winds of the soul will attract each other.